Knives Sports Adventures here with another knife review video. Today's video is going to be about the Lionsteel Kur. So there's a lot of different things about this knife that I usually avoid on my personal knives, but they work on this knife. A lot of things that I typically avoid, but this has actually become one of my favorite knives. I usually avoid wood scales. This is Santos wood. I've had this for about a year with occasional wear, usually on the weekends. But you can see they look really good, so that has turned out well. I usually avoid liner locks. This one is actually a really sturdy, well-made liner lock. I'll take it apart here in a minute so you can see that. I usually avoid flat grinds because I don't like thin, delicate tips, but you can see this one is not a thin tip at all. That tip is very thick. It's a very robust knife. I'm going to measure that here real quick. So the spine of the blade here on the back is looking like, zero it out. Oh, my calipers are malfunctioning. That's definitely not 1 millimeter. About 4.5 millimeters. Even at the tip here, pretty close to the tip, you're still looking at 2.5 millimeters of thickness. So really nice, robust tip on there. It's a bearing flipper, very, very smooth. I love it, if nothing else, just because of that action. So really nice knife, no sharp edges, very well bead blasted on the frame and everything. Nice titanium spacer. Again, something I usually avoid is a wire pocket clip. This one appears to be heat-treated titanium. It is very, very sturdy. Really, really like this thing. I'll test it on my magnetic tray here. It might be steel. Okay, so it looks like that pocket clip is actually steel. But still, very sturdy. Like I said, I've been wearing it a little bit, off and on for about a year. This one hasn't bent like all my other wire pocket clips have. So let's go ahead and disassemble this and take a look at it here. The blade on this one is a carbon steel blade. It hasn't rusted or anything on me. That is potentially an issue with a carbon steel blade, obviously. But like I said, this one's been better than usual. It's their own blend of carbon steel, so it holds an edge pretty well. It's not the best edge holding I've ever had, but it's certainly on par with any of your typical, blade steels. Better than an AUS 8 or something like that. Probably not as good as a really well heat-treated S30V or S35 VN, but overall still a really good knife steel. Other things that are kind of nice on this knife, you can see they've gone with the larger Torx heads on here. These are not the little tiny T6s. I believe even these little guys on the side are, let's see, is it a T8 or a T10? That's a T8. So medium size, but at least they're not the little tiny ones that like to strip. So that's nice. 2 bolts plus the pivot per side on these guys, and that pivot's a little stubborn, so I'm just kind of carefully working it out here. Alright, so there's the pivot. Fits nicely down into that machined wood scale. Skeletonized liners here, really nicely done. Nothing crazy about that, but also makes the knife really nice and light. So while the wood isn't structural, it also doesn't take a full liner and make the knife really heavy. Kind of a medium to large size ball bearing, captured bearing system there. Very nice, very little play. I think that's just a hole to make it lighter. There's no real reason for that hole that I can tell. So there's the blade. Nice, robust, area around that blade. The flipper is removable. I don't know why. I've never removed it, because if you don't remove it, there's no nail. If you remove it, there's no nail nick or anything, so there's really no other way to open the knife if you remove it. So I don't know why you would do that. The only frustrating, well, a couple frustrating things about this knife with a disassembly. If you want to change the pocket clip sides, you literally have to disassemble the entire knife. You can see I had to take both scales off. You'll see in a second it's even more involved than that. Alright, I have to take both scales off. I have to carefully slide that scale out of there without scratching it. Alright, here's the last bolt. Okay, this can go in the magnetic tray. But even if you take all those out, these plates are still holding that pocket clip inside the spacer there. And you can see what I've had to do on these pins. These did not have Phillips heads when I got them, right? These bolts in here fit so tightly into the spacer and the liners, I'm not going to take these out right now, that I had to cut Phillips heads into them, or rather flat blade slots into them, just to get them out reliably. You can see that one, that's the one I cut there. But this one was so tight I couldn't even get it out of the frame to change the pocket clip sides without cutting into it with a Dremel. So that would probably be the only downside of this knife, is if you want to switch the pocket clip back and forth, it's really hard to do. But everything else is really well done on this knife. You can see on this, I'm going to zoom in on that liner lock a little bit. If you look at that liner lock, right, that is almost 13 millimeters of material this way on there, and they haven't thinned it out too much, right? That's 1.5 millimeters of material this way, which makes for a very, very robust liner lock. It's more on par with most of the really sturdy, like big, thick titanium frame locks, because this is steel, right? This is titanium, but this is all steel, and it's very, very sturdy and well made, you know. And the wood prevents you from overextending that liner lock. So really cool knife. Again, a lot of things that I really typically avoid on a knife, but it's actually really nice, and I actually really liked it. I had no issues with it, you know, durability wise or otherwise. So Lionsteel Kur, cool little knife. Really the only downside I found is that disassembly. It was really hard to get apart. But overall, if you're not going to disassemble it a lot, I would say this is a really cool gentleman's folder. It really adds to the gentleman's folder thing with the sturdiness of the knife. A lot of your gentleman's folders are like little, you know, flimsy, kind of questionable knives. This is a really nice, sturdy knife with a big, thick blade and a robust handle, but it still looks really cool, and it's still relatively light. It doesn't weigh down your pocket too much. So that's the Lionsteel Kur. Keep adventuring.